I'm Ryan.
And I'm Nate.
And this is the Sound Project. So today we're talking about the importance of hearing protection.
Yeah.
Not really sure how we've gone this long and not talked about this at some point, especially with we go to concerts regularly. Acoustical testing is not a quiet task.
Yeah.
And then you've also had some personal experiences that we'll talk about throughout as well.
Yep.
So that's kind of what we're talking about today. So firstly, on the screen right now, we do just kind of have an overview of things that we're going to discuss. There's a pretty wide range of things that get covered when we're talking about hearing protection, from different kinds of hearing protection, different applications of when to have a hearing protection. And then there's also legal guidelines that some places have to follow.
Right.
So we'll kind of go through it all.
Yep.
But firstly, let's talk about why is hearing protection important?
Yeah, so basically on the slide here, we just have a bunch of different statistics kind of, warning you about the risks of not using hearing protections in environments that should have hearing protections. So just to get started, one of the craziest statistics is that 1 in 10 Americans have hearing loss, and hearing loss that would affect the ability to understand speech, which is kind of an insane number to think.
Yeah, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Right, and age is pretty prevalent. It's really prevalent when it comes to hearing loss, but also noise exposure is, I think, the most common cause of the hearing loss as well.
Yeah.
So that's also pretty prevalent.
That's something that, I do a decent amount of mixing, outside of work at HD, and so I'm very protective of my ears just in general, going to concerts, but I'm always blown away by the number of people that are at a very, very loud concert and they're just not they have nothing in or over their ears. And it's you're going to feel that.
Yeah. I remember I used to have a friend that after he'd go to concerts, he'd have this one saying that's if your ears aren't ringing afterwards, it probably wasn't a good concert. And then after diving into this, it's no, you're probably just damaging your ears.
Yeah, seriously. And that's something growing up, my parents used to always be hey, turn the music down, because I'd be using a CD player and it would be too loud or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's no, I'm cool. I'm listening to my music loud. And now as an audio engineer, it's man, I really wish I had listened to them earlier on.
Yeah. And the hearing this whole discussion is kind of just something that I found the last year, especially going through my hearing issues now, which we'll get into later. But I don't know. I remember when Gavin got us tickets to the Post Malone concert last year. I saw you guys slipping in your earplugs, and I was I don't know. I want to listen to this loud.
Yeah.
Smart.
Well, and that's one of those things too that I feel a lot of people feel if you're wearing earplugs that you don't get the same experience.
Right.
And we'll get into different kinds of earplugs down the road. But I have a pair of custom earplugs that it literally just sounds like I turned the volume down. Right. So it sounds exactly the same as what anyone else is hearing. You're not losing any frequencies or anything. It literally just turned it down.
Exactly.
But, and actually, I do want to bring up, so you mentioned you did have an experience that caused some hearing damage. Do you want to go ahead and talk about kind of what happened and what you're going through now?
Yeah. So, early November, I had a hearing incident where I was mixing a show, and part of the show, one of the mics was placed kind of lower to the ground, and a box was knocked over and hit the ground right in front of that box. And I had my mixing headphones on, and everything was balanced, but that one spike in the super loud sound just sent kind of sounded like a rocket launcher went off in my ears. And I didn't really think anything of it then. I was obviously, it was wow, that was really loud. I'm going to take these headphones off and turn the levels down low and let them know make sure that doesn't happen again. But the days after, even I started noticing that everything was really, really loud. That didn't used to be loud. It was kind of the gain knob on my ears was turned up.
Okay.
So even watching a video on my phone at halfway volume was sounded really oddly loud and uncomfortable to my ears. And then I started getting pain with that as well, which was not fun. And after decent amount of trips to the audiologist and some research, I found out that I had gotten this thing from the noise incident that's called hyperacusis, which is a hearing disorder. It can come from a lot of different things. Like some people get it from ear infections, or like different types of diseases. But one of the most common causes of how it's onset is exposure to loud noise, whether that's from being front row at a metal concert or having a lot of people get it from just like sudden noises as well.
Sure.
So that was kind of my case.
Okay. And so, like, I mean, you're still like kind of in the process of getting that taken care of. Like, do you want to talk a little bit about like what that process has been?
Yeah, it's definitely not fun, just because before this, like, I loved, didn't really go on like unsafe levels all the time, but like having the music at like a decent volume to where you're able to like really enjoy it. And especially with production as well, like it's hard to get a whole feel for your production and the music that you're making when you're not able to really like be engulfed in the sound and I don't know, be able to listen to it at enjoyable levels, like 75 decibels plus, I guess. So yeah, I went to the audiologist and they did all types of tests to find like my loudness discomfort levels, which is one of the tests they did. And I was around like 70 dB when I first went and did that initial testing, which is like really low. Like the average person's loudness discomfort level is like around like 95 to 100 decibels. So that was pretty alarming. And then after that, it was just like finding all types of different ways to like keep going with school, because like kind of like I mentioned in the interview podcast, like I'm an audio engineering major, so a lot of the classes are in studios, and a lot of the classes are like speaker design, where you're getting like unwanted noise that's not particularly enjoyable to listen to. So a lot of that was just like figuring out like wearing earplugs in class, which also made it hard to communicate with classmates.
Sure.
Which I got into different type of accommodation for really loud classes, which allowed the teacher to wear like this little device that as they spoke into it, I would get like the transcript on my laptop, which would tell me what they were saying. Okay. So that helped. But yeah, definitely nothing to, I guess, want to go through. I've definitely picked up some like healthier quiet habits from that. Like I've gotten into reading books again, just being in like quieter environments to let my ears rest as much as possible. But then there's a lot of different protocols, as into like getting your ears accustomed to being around louder noise as well, which can take like pretty long time. Like most audiologists say like 1 to 2 years until you're like back to your baseline, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild. And that's just like, and that's something that wasn't even your fault, but that's also one of those things that it's like, that is why it's so important to like take care of your ears, is because like, while what you're going through is something that you can like overcome and like it can be resolved, like there's some things where they can't be, like, and you can cause permanent damage. So that's why we want to talk about just why this is so important. So here on this slide, we have a couple of different types of hearing protection. I'll let you go ahead and talk about just like foam earplugs and things like that.
Yeah, so the foam earplugs are probably the most common ones that you see. They hand them out at a lot of concerts and I guess just loud events in general. They're the ones that you twist up and put in your ear, and then they kind of expand while they're in your ear. Those ones have a pretty good decibel blockage. So usually those ones tend to be from anywhere from 20 to 33 decibel blocks.
And then the next ones are custom fit, which that's like my personal preference. And we've talked about these a couple of times in the past too. But basically the way that this works is you get like a molding of your ear. And then they take that molding and they create a custom fit hearing protection for you. And the thing, and so earlier in the episode, like we had talked about how going to a concert and putting in earplugs, like with the custom fit ones, it literally just sounds like the volume got turned down. So some of these other options will actually impact the frequencies that you're hearing. But with the custom fit ones, like you can, and with the ones that I specifically have, I can take out the like filters and replace them.
And that's probably super helpful, just because you get in environments where you don't want this however many decibels blocked off and you want it a little louder or a little more dampened, so having that option is really nice.
Yeah, exactly. And so for that, like, I mean, they don't like sponsor this or anything, but I will give a shout out to the people at All Clear, just because like I love their stuff. But yeah, I mean, again, like being able to swap out the filters, like I switch between like 10s and 15s just depending on how I'm feeling that day. Like most concerts, like most times, like the 10, like -10 is fine. But there's some concerts where it's like, if I know this is going to be really, really loud, then I'll go ahead and do the -15s. Right. But I think they have like -25s and things too. Cool. But yeah, so then the next ones are canal caps.
Yeah. And before we get into that one, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the custom fit ones too. Cause one of the things that you brought up to me when we were talking about it that I didn't know about it or didn't even think of was like the fact that with the custom ones, it's like taking the actual shape of the inside of your ear. So you know for sure that like you're not going to have any sound leakage and you're really getting that true noise reduction rating that they're meant to be, which is also super helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, going into the canal caps, those ones are, you can wear them around your neck and just pop them in and out, and they hang out a little bit further from your ear, but definitely still good, way better than nothing. And those ones tend to have a noise reduction rating of anywhere from like 15 to 25 decibels.
Yeah, nice.
And then going into the earmuffs as well, those ones are like obviously for like a lot of construction workers or wood people who work with like cutting stuff and like saws and stuff like that. Those ones are pretty typical there.
That's what you'll see people at the airport wearing too. Like just when you're constantly around noise are like the big like earmuffs to just protect from all those really loud sounds.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then going to the musicians earplugs, those ones were the ones that you were kind of talking about too, with like the custom ones where you put them in, the frequency is really even across the whole frequency spectrum, so it doesn't feel like you're losing any low end or high end or whatever that you would be hearing if you didn't have those earplugs in. It just feels like the volume is being turned down. And then I have these ones here, which is also kind of nice because like with the foam ones, you're getting like the bright orange things looking like they stick out of your ear, but if you have these like kind of translucent ones that just blend in with your ear, I use them a lot when I was going to class and stuff when my hyperacusis ears were really bad, just because it's not really like noticeable or anything and kind of easy to fit in, I guess.
For sure. And then on here we have to not use cotton balls.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend cotton. The noise reduction rating on them is just really not something that you can like rely on, because obviously it's going to be better than using nothing, but like the size of the cotton, you never know how much, like you could be blocking off 5 decibels in your right ear, and the other piece of cotton could be smaller, and you're just blocking off only 3 to 2 decibels in the other ear. So it's just better to go with something that you know is going to be consistent every time you use it.
Yeah, and a couple of things on that too. Like sometimes you'll see musicians that are on stage like that are using in-ear monitors, which act as hearing protection as well.
Right.
But you'll see them like take one out, and like I have to like kind of cringe anytime I see that, just because it's like that you're basically allowing one ear to take in all that sound and the other one not to, and like that can still cause hearing damage.
Yeah, I feel like it's like not good for your brain to just be like processing all sound going into like your right ear.
Yeah, right.
Too, but who knows?
But that, and then with cotton too, like there's a lot of times when we're talking about isolation that you want to think of isolating a room as waterproofing a room. So if water can get in, then sound can get in, and vice versa.
Right.
And that applies with cotton too. Like when you look at all of these materials, like they're dense materials, where with cotton, it's like, you know, you can tear it apart and it's super thin. And so it applies with sound that way too.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
All right. So yeah, next thing is hearing disorders.
Yeah, there's the top 2 that are in the list are hearing loss and tinnitus, and those are the most common ones. I also threw hyperacusis in there just because it's something that I'm pretty knowledgeable about for going through, so I can speak on that a little bit more. But starting with hearing loss, a pretty insane statistic is 1 in 8 people in the U.S. Age 12 or older have hearing loss in both ears, which that's kind of wild to think about.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, you said something about that earlier too, and it's like that's a lot of people to have hearing damage. Like that's insane.
Yeah. And then also tinnitus, like kind of the one we talked about before, which was my friend's quote of, if you're not leaving the concert with your ears ringing, it's not good, which is what tinnitus is. Like it can be all different types of pitches just depending on the the person and I guess the damage that's been done to the ear. But it's
Right.
pretty much like the loud ringing noise that it's pretty common to hear, like after a loud concert or a sporting event or anything like that. Some people experience it briefly just after a lot of events,
Sure.
and it goes away 1 to 2 days or so. But then you also get the cases that it's pretty consistent, and you have to get like they call them TRT devices,
Okay.
which are hearing aids, and they just basically put in the same exact tone of what you're hearing. So it's kind of like masking that constant ringing sound with other different white noise and tones
Okay.
behind it just to make it bearable.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And then going to hyperacusis as well.
Yeah.
It's not super common. Kind of like I said before, it happens frequently from noise, like loud noise exposure. I think the statistic was 1 in 50,000 people have hyperacusis, and then also here we have it saying 2% of the general population. And it's kind of a hard, I guess I would think it would be a hard statistic to get, just because I'm sure there's a lot of people that have mild hyperacusis that don't look into it, I guess.
Sure.
But yeah, I think 2% is probably a pretty decent number.
That's something that, as like I've talked with you more about, like going through hyperacusis and things like that, that I'm like totally blown away by the number of people that don't know anything about it. Like
Yeah.
the fact that, I think you mentioned like going to a specialist in Chicago, and it's like the fact that you have to travel just to go see someone that like is able to treat it and knows about it, like is
Yeah.
wild to me.
Yeah, I think there's like under 50 audiologists in the U.S. that like specialize in that
Yeah.
specific treatment of hyperacusis. So
Yeah, that's wild. So the next thing is the exposure time and decibel levels. So this chart kind of shows just like what more or less everyday things, like what level they are. And this is, I think like 60 is the conversation. Yeah. So 60 dB is like a normal conversation,
Yeah.
which when you were talking about when you first were going through like or I don't know if treatment's the right,
treatment,
but
recovery, whatever you want
Yeah.
to call it. Yeah.
that your like noise level or like pain level was at 70.
Right.
And it's like, that's only 10 dB higher than like us talking right now.
Yeah, which was really rough because like even now still like it's way better than it was before, but now still it's like you kind of have to take assess from every environment that you go into, like restaurants. You gotta try to sit as far away from a speaker as you can,
Yeah.
like especially in the beginning too, kind of like you were talking about, like only 10 above 60 is like louder conversation, I guess. So
Yeah.
like moments that usually were like fun before with like friends and someone makes a joke and everyone starts laughing loud. Like when I'm used to enjoying those moments, it's turned into kind of like this hurts my ears. Like I can't enjoy this as
Yeah.
much, which thankfully I don't really have those moments like that anymore, but
Sure.
still like, yeah, it can be pretty rough.
Yeah. And then you have a couple other measurements on here. Do you want to go through and talk through some of those?
So these are just like exposure times and decibel levels. Also, I would say this is really good if like you're into music production, just being aware of these values, like whether you're monitoring or mixing. But anything 70 decibels and below, dBA, you can listen to that as long as you want without having to worry about damaging your hearing. And then when you get to 85 dBA, you have to, it's 8 hours or less. So once you hit that 8 hour threshold, you definitely want to put some earplugs in or lower that volume.
And at that level too, like, I mean, you're going to start having like fatigue if you're listening. Like you'll notice like, man, like my ears are feeling tired. Like after just basically analyzing all of the sounds that are coming in.
Right, definitely. And then after that 85 decibel level, the safe listening is cut in half for every 3 decibels that rises above that. So say for an example, you have 85 and you can listen to that for 8 hours. When you bump it up to say 88 decibels, kind of like the example we have on the slide, that timing that you can listen to it is cut in half. So you're only supposed to be listening to that for 4 hours before you have to worry about your hearing being damaged. And then so on 91 decibels, then you only get 2 hours.
Sure.
Yeah.
which is crazy because like when you think about how loud some concerts are,
Right.
and it's like, and you're not wearing hearing protection, especially long festivals where there's multiple days of loud bands.
Right.
It's like,
and I think it's kind of harder to monitor that as well, because when it's like super loud where it's damaging, but you're enjoying that music and it's something
Right.
that you want to be listening to, it's kind of like, I don't really want to have to worry about this. But like if it was something that you didn't particularly enjoy, or even just like a frequency tone that was being blasted at say 100 dB for 2 hours, then that would be like unbearable.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting like that.
Yeah, for sure. The next thing that we're going to talk about are OSHA guidelines. So regarding like noise levels, there's some like legality to this, especially like in the workplace and things like that.
Definitely.
So yeah, go ahead and talk about this part.
So these are pretty much just some guidelines. They're pretty similar to what we talked about in the last slide of just like exposure limit compared to the decibel level. So I kind of just threw in some pictures of different occupations that have to worry about this, which could be anywhere from like construction workers to automobile manufacturers to especially like emergency workers. Like you think of being like being in a car next to a fire truck that's passing by, like that's super loud even from your car. So like,
Yeah.
I don't know, being the person driving that or even around that, you're going to want hearing protection for that, is for sure. And then same goes for like most factory jobs. And then also you see the guy next to the plane or the jet taking off that goes crazy loud. So
Yeah.
anything that exceeds that decibel level and hearing time threshold, you're going to want protection for.
That's when you mentioned like the emergency vehicles. So when I was in college, I was part of like a volunteer fire department.
Yeah.
And with that, like anytime that you're like responding to a call, like if you're in like one of the emergency vehicles, like you have to wear hearing protection. Like that's just one of the rules. Like if you're in a fire truck with like sirens running, like you have to wear hearing protection. Like one, the truck is really loud, and two, the sirens are really loud.
Yeah.
So next are just some practical uses for hearing protection. And like obviously some of the photos on here, like concerts and like basketball games or really any kind of large sporting event, like professional sporting event, are things that you would want to definitely make sure that you're protecting your ears. But yeah, I'll let you go ahead and explain some of these a little bit further.
Yeah, it's just kind of things that like before I learned anything about hearing protection and gone through like the hyperacusis thing with my ears, then I wouldn't have really thought anything to wear hearing protections for these types of things. Obviously, like not a motorcycle guy, but anything related to that. I know you talked about wearing earplugs when you were driving that U-Haul for a while. So anything traveling wise that gets above that decibel level threshold. And then we have a concerts here and all types of lawn work. And like it was hard for me, I guess, accepting like, one of my favorite things to do when I was mowing the lawn is just like throw my AirPods in and listen to music.
Yeah.
But with that background sound of like a lawnmower, then that just means you have to crank the music up on your headphones even more. So like kind of like the last slide, or like the different types of hearing protection, maybe putting on those muffs and then your headphones or earbuds under them. That would help a lot. But yeah, fireworks, definitely when you're inside Purdue Mackey Arena, definitely throw some earplugs in. I don't know if you have to worry about that if you're at the IU Stadium or not, but
You do. It's way louder at the
I'm sure. And then Gavin talked about this in a previous podcast episode. I think it was a soundbite clip as well, but also on the airplane.
Yeah. The airplane thing was really interesting, where it's like anytime that you're traveling on airplanes that you feel tired after traveling, and it's like it has nothing to do with the fact that you're like physically traveling. It's the fact that your ears are analyzing all of those additional sounds.
Yeah.
Where if you wear earplugs, then you don't have that problem.
Right, because I think the average like noise level when you're on a flight is around 90 dB, which is pretty loud. So
Yeah. The other thing too, so we recently did an episode of you talking, like just doing an interview with you, and you talked about how you make like custom rugs and things like that. And I've seen some videos like since meeting you and like watching other people do that. And it seems like it gets pretty loud. So with you having to deal with like hyperacusis, like how's that impacted the rug side of things?
Right. So I definitely took a long break. Like when I first got the diagnosis of hyperacusis, I couldn't even stand like halfway volume level on my phone, which is kind of insane to think about to like someone who's never experienced it. But so I took a break from rugs for probably 3 to 4 months, and then I got back into it and wearing the foam earplugs, and then also hearing protection muffs over the top.
Yeah.
Definitely made it less enjoyable just because I liked having podcasts and stuff in the background or music in the background to listen to. But
Sure.
Kind of a blessing that I found out about it now, because I know for sure I'm going to be making a lot more rugs in the future. And like, if I wouldn't have known about any of that, then I'm like, the rug gun gets up to 85, sometimes 90 decibels.
Okay.
So just being aware of that and having hearing protection is super important.
Yeah, for sure. So then the next thing here, I thought this was like super interesting, where like the level monitoring technology. So you put this like presentation together, and when I was reviewing everything, like, I mean, I have an Apple Watch, like I get the notifications of like, you're in an area that's 90 dB or higher, like, so make sure you're wearing ear protection or move away like in a little bit or whatever. Right. But this kind of took it to the next level. Like, I didn't realize that there was like constant monitoring that I could pull up.
Right.
So yeah, go ahead and talk about this.
Yeah. So there's all different types of decibel meter apps. I don't think we're sponsored by them at all, but Decibel X is the one that I have, and that's been pretty reliable. It's just a simple app on your phone, and as soon as you open it up, it tells you the level of decibels that you're being exposed to. It also tells you the frequency spectrum of where those sounds are coming in at, which is, I guess, not like super important information, but it's interesting to me, being in the acoustics field, knowing that.
If you're live mixing too, that's helpful.
True.
Yeah.
And then also, like, I used to have an Apple Watch. I don't have one anymore, but one of the things that the Apple Watch has is you have this little, like, I think it was called like a widget or something like that, that you can put on the face, like, so that when you tap your Apple Watch, it'll have just a little thing in the corner that says how many decibels that you're being exposed to.
Yeah.
Also, the phone decibel level detection and monitoring, that's the one that I definitely use the most, and I even used it before I got into any of my hearing protection attempts, I guess.
Sure.
But the phone on the phone is just like when you have your headphones connected, and I think it might only be for Apple products. I'm not 100% sure, but definitely with AirPods or like AirPod Max or anything like that, then there's an option to just like swipe down on the top right corner of your phone, and then we'll have a couple images showing you how to do that in the next slide. But it'll pretty much have like a green if you're in the safe decibel range, and then it'll be yellow if like it's a warning of like, hey, you're kind of in that mid-range where you want to make sure you're not listening to this level for a super long time. And then it also has a red like warning range where it's like, you need to turn this down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll go ahead and move to those screenshots and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one on the watch is the one that I started playing with, which, I mean, like I said, I knew that I would get the notifications with that logo, but I didn't know that there was like the constant monitoring. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, the constant monitoring was a cool one that I found out about, and I haven't used it yet, but it's like it monitors the sound around you at all times. So like even at the end of the week, it'll give you like a rundown of like, you were exposed to a lot of sound on this day, like, and kind of like the notification that we have volume turned down, like it automatically turns down that volume threshold that your headphones are able to be allowed to play through, just because it monitors how the levels that you were listening to previously that day or week.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that pretty much wraps up, this episode. This was like a great idea talking about this. Like I said, it was, this was something that I don't know how we've gone so long being in the industry that we're in and we haven't talked about this. But also thank you for being so open about like hyperacusis and like being able to educate people on that too.
Yeah, for sure. It's fun talking about it. Like, I don't know, it's not something that like, I guess I would look to talk about and like open up to people about, but like if there's anyone like who's watching it that may be struggling with it or like may run into it in the future, like just having those pointers, like someone who's already gone through it and found different ways to adapt with it could definitely be helpful for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's hopefully some like people recognize like, oh, maybe like maybe I'm experiencing something like that and I need to go get like something looked at. So
or prevent those issues from happening in the future. Yeah,
for real. So everyone, wear your ear protection when you're in a loud situation. But yeah, thank you again so much for being open with it.
Yeah, thanks.
So this has been another episode of the S.O.U.N.D Project. Thank you for being a part of the S.O.U.N.D Project, and we'll see you next week.